From the world's emptiest airport, which was eventually used as a warehouse to store rice, to an abandoned stadium in the heart of the Amazon rainforest, and from a massive hotel in one of the least visited countries in the world to a revolutionary science project that ended up wasting billions of dollars. In today's video, we bring you some of the most useless mega projects in the world. Number 5. Brazil's controversial stadium in the rainforest. Brazil famously hosted the 2014 Football World Cup, and for a country so obsessed with the sport, it was a pretty big deal. However, the country needed a lot of renovations to be ready for the showpiece event. In total, Brazil had to build 12 new football stadiums and renovate some old ones. This massive megaproject was going to cost Brazil a total of $11 billion, and despite the immense cost, the country was looking forward to showing its passion for the sport to the whole world. But as in many countries that host a World Cup, these huge megaprojects are not necessarily economically viable in the long run. Critics and economic consequences are often overlooked to deliver the best show possible. For the World Cup, in many ways, the whole project didn't make any economic sense. But the most obvious was the construction of the Arena da Amazônia in Manaus, which the stadium was in use yet again for a few competitions like the 2016 Olympic Games. But as with the 2014 World Cup, it was only needed for a few days. It hasn't been used for many events ever since, and is only a reminder of how the money to build it could have changed the lives of many Manaus residents. Number 4. China's abandoned ghost cities. China's rise as a major economic power in the early 2000s was accompanied by a real estate boom. Megaprojects sprung up all over the country, and its major cities became home to some of the world's most famous skyscrapers. However, not all these projects were a success. In fact, China has accumulated plenty of ghost cities that cost billions to build but have largely remained empty. For today's video, we turn to China's Hebei province, which is home to one such project. The Xiangyun International Project is an 1,800-acre development in Shijiazhuang that was dubbed as a city within a city. Developed at a cost of $3 billion, the project consisted of two parts: a bigger high-end residential community with apartments and theme parks, and a smaller commercial hub containing shopping complexes and skyscrapers. The location of the project is very convenient, as it is built right next to a high-speed train stop and in close proximity to underground metro stations. This location isn't at all isolated like some of the other projects we have featured in this series. So how did this enormous project end up abandoned with almost no population? When the project was first announced, there was a lot of positive excitement. 700 housing units were quickly sold, but in 2014, the construction was stopped abruptly, as the real estate company behind the project was put under investigation by the local authorities. By 2017, the charges of corruption were proved and the main developer landed in jail. Consequently, the property prices saw a sharp decline and the company declared bankruptcy. As of now, thousands of homeowners have not been able to move in because the project has been confiscated by the government. The half-finished development remains unused to this day, and the already developed areas have started deteriorating. Strangely, traffic can be heard roaring across the streets just outside the district, but inside it paints a picture of a ghost town that is only inhabited by stray animals. These days the Xiangyun International Project is more of a tourist attraction than a residential. This $3 billion mega project will only be visited by adventurers. Number 3. The world's emptiest airport. In 2009, the island nation of Sri Lanka just ended its deadly civil war. The victorious president Mahinda Rajapaksa immediately made up plans to give the country an economic push. At the time, the country's biggest city, Colombo, was the only city with an international airport. However, that was all about to change as the president envisioned a second commercial hub in the Hambantota region, located 250 kilometers away from the former capital. this region was already experiencing a massive construction boom and a new seaport was built. There, with the help of China, a partner willing to invest billions into infrastructure projects. The next big plan was to build Sri Lanka's second international airport in the small town of Matala, located just outside of Hambantota city. At the time, a government agency submitted a report advising against the construction of a second international airport in Matala. The report concluded that the money would be better spent on extending the international airport in Colombo instead. However, the government ignored the warning and still went through with the plan. Construction began in November 2009 and the airport was completed in just over 3 years. It was named after the president himself and was officially opened for flight operations in March 2013. The total cost of the project was $210 million, 190 of which were loaned by China. The Matala Rajapaksa International Airport is a modern airport by any standard. It can handle up to 1 million passengers every year and has a 35-meter-tall air traffic control tower. Its proximity to Sri Lanka's most famous tourist attractions makes it an ideal location for many travelers. So there was some optimism when the airport was opened. But things didn't pan out as the government had hoped. While it looked like a reasonable project at first, the red flags were always there. Most important of which is its geographic location. The airport is located in a small city with a population of just 20,000 people, a third of which live below the poverty line. So, the local demand for the airport is non-existent. Even though it is close to many tourist hotspots, a lack of effective transportation makes it less desirable for travelers. In 2014, the airport was used by 3,000 flights and serviced 50,000 passengers. For an airport designed to serve 1 million passengers, the numbers were too low. But the worst was yet to come. Due to low demand, the airliners were quick to cancel operations and within a year it was registering losses of $18 million a year. Even Sri Lanka's state airline stopped operating flights at the start of 2015 after Rajapaksa's defeat in the elections. With no demand and rarely any traffic, the wild animals in the vicinity started to outnumber the people using the airport. On one occasion, the government had to employ 300 soldiers to chase the wild animals away from the premises. Its huge area was also used as a rice storage warehouse to reduce losses. Matala Rajapaksa was making all the wrong headlines, and in 2016, Forbes termed it as the world's emptiest airport. In 2018, the airport was completely abandoned when FlyDubai, the only airline still using it, stopped its operations. Critics claim that the project was not economically viable from the start and that it was developed simply because Hambantota was the home region of the former president. Former President Mahinda Rajapaksa has been accused of pushing the country further into China's debt trap, especially after his seaport project also failed. The airport became briefly operational during the COVID-19 pandemic as the demand for return flights grew. Its long-term future, however, remains uncertain with no clear plan in place. Number 2. America's largest failed science project. We start today's list with one of the largest physics megaprojects in history. When completed, the superconducting Super Collider in Texas would consist of a circular tunnel system around Waxahachie that would serve as the world's most energetic particle accelerator. Particle accelerators use electric fields to accelerate charged particles to very high speeds. They are used for research purposes and help scientists unearth the mysteries of our universe. Particle accelerators have been around since the 1930s and as of today, about 30,000 of these have been built around the world. However, none of them come close to producing as much energy as the superconducting Super Collider planned to be built in Texas in the 1980s. Design calculations for the SSC began in 1983 and the project was approved by the Reagan administration in 1987. The project found massive support in Texas due to its wide range of applications and the hope of scientific supremacy. But while the plans for the project looked promising, reality painted a different picture. As it turned out, a project of this scale faced many unsolved challenges which eventually led to a point where the whole project had to be reconsidered. But what exactly happened? The biggest roadblock, as with many failed megaprojects, was the budget overrun the SSC accumulated over the years. According to initial estimates, the whole project was to be completed at a cost of $4.4 billion. However, the project's magnitude made it impossible to stay within the allocated budget. The SSC's ring would have a circumference of over 87 kilometers, meaning that a tunnel of that proportion would become one of the longest tunnels in the world and completely surround the town of Waxahachie. That involved undertaking a massive civil engineering project to excavate millions and millions of tons of soil away from the construction site. Questions were being raised about the viability of the project. Many politicians and even members of the scientific community contended that the money could be better spent elsewhere. NASA was already working on the proposal to launch the International Space Station and required as much funds as they could get. By 1992, the estimated costs had already ballooned up to $9 billion, and the case against the project was getting stronger. Just a year later, in 1993, the cost estimates had soared up to $11 billion. By that time, $2 billion had already been spent on the project to dig up a tunnel extending up to 22 kilometers in circumference. With costs rising and rising, the government finally decided to officially pull the plug on the superconducting Super Collider. Since the 22 kilometers of tunnels were not in use, they were intentionally filled with water as a way to preserve them. While the United States canceled the SSC, the efforts to build a high-energy particle collider continued in Europe. In 2008, the European Organization for Nuclear Research successfully built the Large Hadron Collider. It was completed at a cost of just $5 billion and lies in a 27-kilometer tunnel near Geneva. Meanwhile, parts of the SSC site in Waxahachie are now occupied by a chemical manufacturing company. The SSC was an epic project that would have shaped the United States in the field of particle physics. But it turned out to be way too ambitious at the time and ended up costing billions of dollars without any results. Number 1. The most useless hotel in the world. Next on the list is the tallest unoccupied building in the world, also known as North Korea's Tower of Doom. North Korea isn't too keen on hosting tourists. The state's policy of secrecy and the state's regulation of any interaction between the locals and the foreigners means the country isn't a major tourist attraction. However, this reluctance to host tourists wasn't always there. Because in the 1980s, North Korea, fueled by its rivalry with South Korea, planned on hosting thousands of foreign visitors in the world's tallest hotel. South Korea, backed by the United States, had won the hosting rights to the 1988 Olympics. Moreover, a South Korean state firm just finished building the tallest hotel in the world in Singapore. Not to be left behind, North Korea won the hosting rights of the 1989 World Festival of Youth. A year later, the country broke ground on a unique pyramid-shaped hotel in the capital, Pyongyang. At a height of 330 meters, the Rugong Hotel would surpass the hotel built by South Korea to become the tallest hotel of the time. North Korea had planned to inaugurate the hotel on the eve of the festival. However, the construction couldn't be completed in time due to engineering problems. Funnily enough, it is actually not finished till this day. The hotel's height finally topped out in 1992. However, by that time the financial backer of the project, the Soviet Union, no longer existed. The financial support dried up and the project was stalled. At this point, the Rugong Hotel was just a hollowed-out concrete structure with no windows or any sort of construction beyond the outer walls. Construction remained halted for the next 16 years until an Egyptian company took over the project. By 2012, They installed a glass facade and LEDs to the building's exterior for $180 million. North Korea's new political problems meant that the renewed efforts didn't last long. Either and the building was abandoned yet again. It is estimated that the completion of the Rugong Hotel will cost upwards of $2 billion, which is about 5% of North Korea's total GDP.